Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Danish Sound Cluster webinar. Glad to be here again. I know it wasn't supposed to be me again, but you have to stick with it. As some of you might remember, I'm Pedro. I am also a host here. Jeppe couldn't come this time as well. Hopefully you'll be able to come in the next one. We'll see. But meanwhile, I'm helping out. So very interesting topic today. And it's called Exploring the Power of Intentional Use of Music to Improve Mental Health. As the name so says, music obviously has very special properties, not only for enjoyment, but also for health. And we have two very good guests today to talk about that. Before I introduce you to the guests, I just want to yet explain the structure of this webinar. I start by giving a small introduction to it. Obviously, we have two guests today, not three. Normally we have three, so the webinar might be a little bit shorter today. You have a Q&A section down there. Instead of writing in the chat, please, whenever there's something of your curiosity, just put a question. No questions are bad questions. So go ahead, put as many questions as you can. And then we will take them later. So the guests will have their time, and then we will do the Q&A/discussion after that. This will be recorded, so I hope everybody's fine with that. That also means that you can later watch it if you like. Share it with your friends. This is very, very important. People need this for their health. And at the end of the webinar, there will be a small questionnaire. So when you press leave or when I close it, there'll just be 5 questions that you can answer. It will help us to, analyze what you think and make it better and better. So please take those 1 or 2 minutes to answer the questions. We appreciate it a lot. And that's kind of the structure. So let's get into the topic. I have here a little reference that I want to start with, and then I will introduce you to the speakers. So music is often rated to be among the top 10 pleasures in life, but research shows that listening to music can be more than a pleasant pastime. Music affects our brains, bodies, and behavior, and we can consciously use these effects to promote health and well-being. In this presentation, we will have 2 great guests that will give an introduction to music neuroscience and outline the research and how music can be used to improve various aspects of mental health. And today we have 2 very good guests. First, I will start with Christian Humaida, who is the founder of Soundwheel. Hey, Christian.
Yep.
So Christian is best known to be to the general public as one part of the rap duo UFO Yefa. Is that correct? But in recent years, Christian has actually worked in the meditation as a meditation teacher, an entrepreneur, and a CEO, developing music meditations through the company Soundwheel. Christian has developed a series of music meditations, which are particularly aimed at groups of people who drive at a high mental pace and therefore find it difficult to get fully into gear through more ordinary meditations. So welcome, Christian. Happy to have you here.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
And then our second guest, and it's not the first time, is the second time, I think, we have Kira Vibe Jespersen. And welcome back, Kira.
Thank you.
So Kira is a PhD and also has an MSc in psychology and additional BA in music therapy. She holds a PhD in health sciences from Aarhus University, where she is now assistant professor at the Danish National Research Foundation's Center of Excellence for Music in the Brain. Her research focuses on clinical applications of music with a particular interest in the effect of music on sleep and the potential use of music for insomnia. As part of Kira's research, she evaluates both the effect of music interventions and aims to unravel some of the neurophysiological mechanisms underlying these effects. So very happy to have you here again, Kira. It's always interesting to know what you're up to.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Cool. So now you know who we have here, and without further ado, I would like to give the stage to Christian. So whenever you like, Christian, you can give us your everything.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen here. Do you see my
Yes,
a guy on a mountaintop?
there's the guy.
Okay, great. Yeah, but thank you for the introduction, Pedro. I'll start by giving you a little bit of background on how I ended up here, and then speak a little bit about my work with Soundwheel and what we've found so far. First of all, I need to say that I come from a very practical angle in terms of music. I have played music most of my life, and you can be with music and perform music and compose music in many different ways and from many different spaces within yourself. And mine has always been a very sort of, music has served as an emotional valve for me myself. So it was like the main way for me to express myself. When some emotions came up when I was a kid, I used the piano to kind of get it out of my system, or at least to look at it or to spend time with it. So for me, music served as something that had to do with my emotions primarily. And the first time I kind of had a face-off with another way of being with music was with my piano teacher, who wanted me to keep looking at the notes. And I was looking at the keys, listening and playing on off my ear, or how you would phrase that. And she would like me to, of course, learn the language, learn the structure, and learn the theory. And that wasn't really that wasn't really for me. So we had some quarrels and some face-offs there. And I mean, it's not to say that one thing is right and one thing is wrong. It's more to kind of highlight that there are so many different ways to perform or to be with music. I mean, you can be an instrumentalist who is super skilled at playing the violin, and you can put specific things and nuances to some music that someone created 400 years ago, and express yourself that way. Or you can be someone who write quote unquote simple stuff that really touches millions of people emotionally and helps them to grasp emotions, or to work through emotions or hard times. So there are many different ways. Later on, I'll just switch to this one, because later on I was fortunate enough and a lot of other stuff to create myself a career as a rap artist here in Denmark. One of the things that kicked that off was I won the national championship in freestyle rap in 2002, which is quite a harsh discipline, so to speak. It's built up a little bit like in the old Rome with the gladiators fighting. So it's like it's built up like a boxing match. So you get into that boxing ring, and the 3,000 people are looking at you, and you don't have a clue what you're going to say in the next 3 minutes. But it has to be rap, it has to rhyme, and it has to be about the topic that you receive 10 seconds before you need to start. So it's really something about being able to be in the moment and to improvise and to be quite intuitive and have a faith and a trust in that, in your ability to improvise and not to plan everything out, right? So that was an interesting discipline, also stressful discipline to attend in. But back in the days, I was quite good at it, and it kicked off my career. So that got me started, and we had a nice run with Ufo Jeppe of around 10 years, where we, dreams came true. We put out albums, we played concerts all over the country, and yeah, the whole shebang. So that was really nice. Later on, when I was done being a rap star, I still produced and composed music more for like TV shows, and you see a few of them here, like TV productions. And that's where I really started, focusing on, okay, how much you really can, how your intention in terms of how you want to cultivate people's emotions with music, right? So that was really a time where I learned a lot about that too. Later on, I trained to become a meditation teacher, and I worked with meditation for several years, facilitating meditations for clients, and it was through that work I really saw the value and the power of music within a mental health context. Because down the line, I was, facilitating these sessions, and eventually some of my clients would ask me if they could have like some music to go with the meditation sessions we did. And I thought, yeah, sure. I'd heard that a lot of people were using music for meditation. I started looking around for quote unquote meditation music. And what I found was quite, not too a little bit boring, maybe not to be harsh, but it was very like a background blanket, and I guess that's like the purpose of it, to replace the silence, right? So the music was just something very, very calm and subtle that were in the background. But I got an idea, like, since I thought, well, I've been producing music most of my life, and I've spent my whole life learning and experiencing how it affects emotions and people's mindsets. So what if I embed in the music, if I try to embed the intention of this session, what will happen? Because one of the challenges for some of my clients was, especially those coming from a high mental pace, was one, if someone is talking to you, guiding you throughout the whole meditation. So if you have a meditation and there's a voice in your ear for 15 minutes, for some clients, it was very difficult to actually let go and find into another space within themselves, because they needed to understand language, So a place in their brain that understand language kept being awoken, because, they needed to listen to a voice and listen to language. So I thought, if I can put some of the stuff that this voice is saying or doing, if I can put some of that into the music instead, I can reduce the amount of bespoken guidance. So I can maybe just have a little bit in the beginning and the middle and the end. And then there will be like these islands of music in the middle where they will not be disturbed by language. So I started experimenting with that. And especially those, as I said, coming from a high mental pace, they responded very positive to this approach. Also, ADHD, ADD, people, maybe not, all of those who found it quite difficult to come from like 120 an hour and then just bridge the gap to 0.5 in an instant. Instead of being relaxed, usually they experience being provoked by this very subtle energy that they were facing, because they came from somewhere else that was so different. And I thought, what I learned down the line was that this music that I produced, coming from hip hop, where I come from, and it had more energy, it had more progression and dynamics. So it kind of served as something in between for these people. So they were able to bridge that. Also, one of the things that I think is very important, speaking about meditation and mindfulness in general, is that here in the West, I think the story has been a lot about, we're using meditation to become quiet, to become subtle, to drop the tempo. And of course, if you're in a very high tempo, that's a super good thing to do. But I would say that as I see meditation, it's not only about that. It's more about getting actually into yourself, like moving your focus from being turned outwards in the world around you and turning it inwards to your emotions, to your thoughts, feelings, your sensations, everything that's inside of you, basically, and to practice that shift. And when you do that, you can find peace and quiet and calmness there, but you can also find other good stuff. That's actually the opposite. You can find new energy, or you can find another perspective. You can find, hope or focus. You can find different great stuff in there. That's my experience. And so that's why I thought music do not have to be super quiet and soothing only to make this transition. So another thing that's funny about, in our Western culture in general, I think we are very stimulated in our intellectual, cognitively part of the brain, right? We receive so much information through those centers in the brain, and our whole society kind of build upon those values. Maybe you could say that. And I think one of my ideas I wanted to test out is, okay, but maybe if we could say we are a bit as humans overstimulated there, then we should try to stimulate somewhere else than just, so it's just interesting to see that lots of the different stuff we do to kind of get back in balance are actually also trying to approach our system through the same entrances, you could say. So there's, I think you could say that we are, yeah, I think it's interesting to see how we can go in a more sensational way, and music obviously is that. So it's not that I'm saying that those various therapeutic tools don't work. I'm sure they are very valuable for a lot of people, but for those I had in my practice that had a hard time accessing these particular ways of trying to cultivate their emotions, for instance, it seemed like music was very very valuable. Yeah. So we built a sound wheel. We built sound wheel. So I thought, having enough of that feedback from clients saying, "Oh, Christian, this is really awesome, and this makes me feel good, and works in a different way than the other stuff I've tried," I thought, okay, great. Instead of me just facilitating this for 10 people at a time in a room, I should try to find a way to distribute this on a larger scale digitally. So yeah, I put together a little team, and we started building an app. Being an old musician myself, I learned the hard way how difficult it is to build a sustainable business on top of Spotify and YouTube and all the big distribution channels that's already in place. Probably due to the fact that when they developed, the music business was so busy fighting them that they forgot to develop their own systems. So they kind of lost that race, and so I wanted to see if we could build a tool where we kind of control the value flow, and it became Soundwheel, as you see here. It's we try to keep it a very simple tool. We don't want a lot of in the app. We don't have a lot of visuals and stuff like that, because we want to kind of be a facilitator of this experience, but still we need the user to be a co-creator of the experience. So if we fill up that blanket with a lot of colors, a lot of pictures and everything, we kind of already showed what they were supposed to imagine or visualize, and we don't want to do that. So that's a delicate balance between supporting the user enough to have this great experience, but not being in the way of having their own experience, basically. So that's like a balance we always try to keep at the right point. Yeah. I'll just see here. So some of if I should try to characterize a little bit about what it is that I'm doing with the music, then I can do that like retrospectively, but this honestly, this was just created from trying to being as open as intuitive and in kind of in sync with my own like intentions for what this was supposed to be and do. So I didn't put a lot of thought into how should this sound before I started producing it. Funny enough, I just started doing it, and kind of odd as it might sound to some, kind of tried to bring myself into the same state of mind that I was hoping the music would do for the listener. So retrospectively, I can see that I have created like a musical expression that kind of synthesizes a lot of different genres and traditions. I can show you. I use like traditional instruments like rattles And also I have maybe you can see this. I have my like a drum, like a shaman drum stuff that is like used by indigenous people around the world in different traditions and cultures. But I also use like my acoustic piano, my guitar, my electric guitar, synthesizers, beats, hip hop beats, and stuff like that, electronic elements. So it's really a mix of something that I believe as humans are kind of instinctively layered down our, I don't know, reptile brain or something, meeting something that we know and feel more related to from our modern time, like music, how it would sound in the radio, for instance. So I really tried to find a mix there, and also to be quite global about it, so that it's not like specifically Nordic or specifically South African or South American, trying to have a little bit of all of it and not being too specific, so that hopefully this goes deeper than just specific cultures, but taps into something more archetypical, human musical relation, so to speak. And of course, I don't know anything about that. This is just my hunch, and what we get feedback from and that's nice to see now, where we have like research being done on it, that we could see people using it from Africa also felt like they were connected to some kind of ancestral heritage kind of thing, even though they are in Africa. And I think that was really great for me to see. Okay, it seems like actually people can tap into this and be connected to a deep place within, even though they come from various cultures. Another characteristic about the music is that it's quite repetitive. So it coming from hip hop again, that's built upon loops, where you have a little sample, you loop it. I mean, at least that was how hip hop used to be. So you have something that's repeated over and over again, but then still adding new layers. So it kind of grows or evolves, but the brain is not surprised. The brain feels safe. The brain is getting what it is expecting, but still adding on layers, opening nuances, new dimensions within the same basic patterns. So it's quite predictable. The brain do not need to be alert or super put a lot of attention into what is going to happen. But then again, over time, widening the experience. And then there's lots of vocal, but no words, except of course for the small guided parts. But there's lots of singing, but it's humming or chanting, or so. The voice is the most traditional instrument that we have as humans. So I think the sound of a voice is instantly creating some bridge, some path within, if you're listening to it. So I think it's very interesting to use the voice. It's also kind of what bridges our physical body with our psychological self, so to speak. The voice is right there in the intersection of that. So lots of voice, different choruses and harmonies, patterns and rhythms. And one little funny thing I wanted to mention is that sorry, it's getting a little nerdy here, but I just wanted to show this. I have these, this is like a stereo set of microphones. It's not, so yeah. So it's two similar microphones. They are identical, but you have two of them. So you record a stereo file, a left, right. And so when I sing some of these voices, I'm actually moving from side to side. So I can create patterns moving that will be picked up in the stereo field of the recording when you're listening to it. And then I've learned how interesting it is to create, like, if you have one voice going from left to right and then back to left. And then if you have a over voice, like a higher voice that harmonizes with that voice, and you mirror it. So you go from right to left to right again. And then when you're listening on a headset, it really sounds like, okay, there are these two voices here, and they are just traveling through my brain to the other side of my brain and back again. And it's like really being like an immersive experience, like you are really embedded or immersed down in this pool of music, basically. And again, I don't know what it's doing. I can just measure that it's doing something, and that people are really responding well to it. So that's just one of the things that I kind of developed over time, and I find it very efficient to work with that. And of course I could sit in my mixer panel and do these pannings, but I truly believe that it works better actually doing them physically in the room, having all the small characteristics change when you move your head from side to side and you do the opposite. So that was a little bit about how I create the music and what I think of when I do it. Some of the benefits we have encountered so far from using Soundwheel and using this music is stress relief, improved sleep, a sharpened focus and higher productivity, a feeling of entitlement, more energy, empowerment. I think that's very important, at least to me, to make people feel empowered and feel like that they have the ability to change whatever situation that they might be caught up in. So to kind of be able to support that sensation. And now I thought that I should give you a little demonstration as I've been speaking a lot, and being a guy that vouches for the more sensational experiences. I thought I might as well end my little talk here with actually demonstrating what it sounds like. So I would love to invite all of you to join. I've created like a short version of a sound journey, as we call these small sessions. So this is 4 minutes long. Usually they are 7 to 10 minutes, but no more. I think rather have short sessions that you actually do than have long sessions that you do once a month or whatever. So this is 3.5, 4 minutes, and I hope that you will, just make sure you're sitting comfortable. Maybe just stretch your arms a little bit. Now we've been sitting in the same position for a while, so if you just stretch your arms, shake them a little bit, and when you put them down again, just make sure you're sitting comfortably and relaxed, and maybe close your eyes and embark on this little journey of sound that I will share for you with you now. 2 seconds. So should be able to hear it here.
Sit yourself comfortably.
Nothing? Did you hear anything? No? I think
Share again and activate the audio. Maybe that's why.
I think I'll need to, stop sharing and then. Okay.
There we go.
Sit yourself comfortably or lie down and begin by inhaling deeply right to the bottom of your belly. As you breathe out, let go of all the tension, let go of all the worries, let go of everything that stands in the way of a good inward journey. Imagine that you are standing on a boundless grassy plain and notice a herd of wild horses grazing here. The animals' powerful exterior and majesty draws you toward them. And before you know it, you are among them. One horse is especially curious about you, and it kind of invites you to sit yourself on it. Now you are sitting there, and feel how you have almost become one with the muscular animal. In a moment, at a special signal, the whole herd will set off on a wild ride across the prairie. Hooves thundering against the ground, wind rumbling in your ears. Are you ready? Go. You have ridden wildly and fiercely over the vast lands of the prairie on the back of this powerful horse. The faster you've gone, the more power you've put in, the more energy you've felt running through your system. So now you are left standing, quivering and recharged. And feel how all this power is at your call. It's time to say goodbye for this time. But you can always return to your horse if you need a shot of extra energy. But for now, your focus turns to the room you are in. Feel your feet on the ground. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so that was like a little preview of what it sounds like, what it can sound like, and I just wanted to share like a QR code. So if any of you are interested, the app is out there and you can download it. And using this coupon code, Antler23, you will have 3 months of free access to try it out. So we just want to have this out there and being tested and tried by as many people as possible. And I think there'll also be a mail to all the participants, right, with this link and so on, if you don't really have time to get it now. But yeah, that was so far everything from me and Soundwheel. So thank you.
I was riding the horse, definitely. I was in it. It was like a big, like, woohoo, let's go. Really good, man. Thanks a lot. Very inspiring. How's the music creation process? That's what I'm mostly like, wow, how do you do this? I mean, do you start from where you feel, or do you start from the music you need to create for a certain feeling?
Depends. I mean, most times it starts with the music, and then I try to see where could this go or where could this take people. So the music takes the lead, which I think is good because, you know, that's what is in the center of this approach. Sometimes I do have a, you know, for instance, we have a section for music that can help people fall asleep, which obviously doesn't have the same tempo and energy as this one. So then I would sit down and I would know, okay, now I need to slow down the BPM. I need to find something, start creating something that's more soothing. So I try to get into that mindset. But usually the music is taking the lead. And then after having the music, I find a narrative. I figure out a narrative that kind of, you know, just communicates this, right?
I mean, if you feel sleepy, you probably won't be able to finish the song. So it's it makes sense. No, that's cool. Well, thanks a lot. That was really good. Yeah, and so now we can go to Kira, and I guess that's going to be a natural transition. So go ahead, Kira.
Thank you, and thank you, Christian. It's very interesting to hear about your work. Yes, so okay, I'll tell you a bit about the research that we do in music. So I hope that you see my screen now. Yeah. So my background is in science and research. I'm a psychologist by education and music therapist, as Pedro mentioned, and I did my PhD and also research now at Center for Music in the Brain at Aarhus University. So my perspective will be on, like, from a music psychology and music neuroscience perspective. And to begin with, I think it's important to say that this idea of the connection between music and health is not a new thing. We see the first painting here is a scene from the Bible, where David is playing the harp to ease the torments of King Saul. So these ancient tales also tell us like about the idea of music being used for soothing and healing purposes. And similarly, in the ancient Greek, Pythagoras also developed a theory of music and how music could be used to soothe the mind and the body and the soul. And similarly, as I think Christian also touched upon, not only historically, but also cross-culturally, we see that music is used in every society across the globe for specific behavioral context. And this was a paper a couple of years ago using a music ethnographic approach, showing that when looking at all these music samples from across the globe, there were 4 purposes that music were consistently used for. So one was love songs, another was dancing, one was music used for healing, and the 4th was lullabies, so music used for sleep. Interestingly, they also found that music for each purpose had some similar characteristics, regardless of where in the world and which music tradition it was from. For instance, dance songs showed some characteristics different from lullabies or healing songs. So just to remember like the globalness of this phenomenon. In our recent years, the research on music has really increased and now shows very clearly that music can impact both our body, our minds, and our brains. And of course, the effects are interconnected. So just one example, for instance, in the body, of course, depending on the type of music, we see effects on physiological measures such as heart rate, respiration, or blood pressure, for example. Similarly, from the psychological perspective, we see that people report using music for emotion regulation quite a lot, also arousal regulation, and also music is a large part of social, has a large social element in a way, both for group coherence, but also identity aspects, especially in the teenage years. Music is a huge part of also your identity and your social affiliation in a way. And when looking at how music is processed in the brain, one of the super interesting things is that, music is not just processed one place. The very interesting thing about music is that it actually engages quite broad networks of brain activity related to different elements of the processing. So I'll just go through them one by one. So of course, music is sound. So one basic part of the music processing is the sound processing. I hope maybe you can see my mouse. So the sound processing is done in the primary auditory cortex around here. It's also conveyed via the brainstem and thalamus. So that's kind of the basic acoustic features. But we also know that music is a lot more than just sound. It is structured sound in many ways. So these kind of higher order musical features such as harmony, melody, rhythm, etc. Are processed in network related to secondary auditory areas, but also motor regions and also regions here related to more attentional processes. So keeping track of the music over time. And that's an important characteristic of music, that it develops over time. And this time structure is also, what you play around with when doing music. And of course, then music also engages attentional processes. So we keep track of this development over time with our auditory working memory. It engages attention networks in the brain. In addition to this, music is also very related to memory systems and memory networks in the brain. So we know also from research that music can activate memory networks, both in healthy brains, but also in neurodegenerative disorders like dementia. We can actually use music as a stimuli, and maybe because it engages these broad networks of the brains, we can access memory traces that are harder to activate, for instance, via language. Then, of course, music is also an activity. So we play, we sing music, we move to music, we dance. So music is also closely linked to motor functions. And we see this also in the brain, that, of course, engaging with music activates motor cortex, so the movement part of the brain, but actually also just listening to music, as we saw with the higher order musical features. So especially listening to music with a salient rhythmic aspect activates these motor regions. So we talk about like a very close audio-motor coupling, which we can also use for health purposes. We see that, for instance, in Parkinson's, where we can stimulate and stabilize gait function via rhythmic cueing, via providing a stable rhythmic cue. Then the motor functions, which are working less well in Parkinson's, then they are stabilized and actually enhanced via this rhythmic cueing. Then finally, as Christian also touched upon, music is also a very emotional experience. And we also see this in the brain, that music activates these primarily subcortical regions, what's called often the limbic network, which relates to emotional processing of music. And actually, very interesting, music can even activate reward networks of the brain. I can show you one of these early studies showing especially these both frontal and subcortical regions are activated. And why this is interesting is that normally we see activation of this reward network in very like strong evolutionary stimuli, such as very pleasant food, chocolate, sex, drugs. But when people listen to music that they like, we actually also see engagement of this reward network. So it can, of course, that is important for our emotional state. That music cannot only express emotions, but it can also affect our emotional state and maybe activate pleasurable responses. For instance, that would be important in symptoms of depression, where you are generally have a lower, what we call hedonic tone. So it is harder to get the experience of something which you like or which is pleasurable to you. And here music can be a potential stimulus. These emotional responses are also reflected in the body. So here people listen to music they really like that kind of invoked chills. So really pleasurable parts of the music compared to music that they had no particularly response to. We see here in the heart rate is also affected by these aspects of the music that were particularly pleasurable to people. And also the muscle tone, EMG is the muscle tone. We see a clear effect of that compared to control music, and also the respiration measures are affected. So this is just a way of seeing that, again, music can sound in many different ways, and we know that it can express many different emotions, but it can also actually affect our individual emotional state when we listen to music that we really like. So I'll just, a lot of this research we've summarized recently in this white book called Music Interventions in Healthcare, where we summarize both this basic knowledge about music neuroscience that I just went briefly through with you. So the idea that now we know that music can engage all these different networks, and that's a very important part of the mechanisms underlying potential health benefits of music. So some of them may relate to the auditory processing of music. Some mechanisms may have a more cognitive, so the attention music processing part. Some aspects may relate to rhythm and motor effects or arousal, so wakefulness or relaxation, and the emotional aspects of music. So in this white paper, we discuss both the mechanisms and the basic research, and then we kind of map out the knowledge that we have about the effects of music in both a number of somatic disorders, psychiatric disorders, also for general well-being. So if you're interested, the white paper is freely available at the Music in the Brain webpage and can be downloaded there. It was made in collaboration with the Danish Sound Cluster and other industry partners. So to wrap up, I'll just give you an example from some of the research that I've been very much into, which is the effect of music on sleep and insomnia. Because we know that many people listen to music when they have difficulties sleeping. This is a Canadian study showing that around 25% of the general population have listened to music when they had trouble sleeping within the last year. When focusing on people with insomnia, so that is more severe and persistent sleep problems, almost 45% have used music as a sleep aid. But again, from a research perspective, why should music be able to affect sleep? Well, we know that music can affect arousal. This is one study using different types of music, using this heart rate variability measure as a measure of arousal, and seeing that some music, especially related to the tempo of the music, higher tempo is more arousing, whereas slow tempo music is stabilizing low arousal. That is one way of measuring arousal. Another way it can be using, for instance, looking at the hormones cortisol, which is the most prevalent stress hormone in the body. And here, the red line is the control group with no music, and the black line is the music group. They're undergoing a medical procedure, which is potentially stressful. We see that actually the music kind of counteracts the stress response, which is seen in the control group with no music. So it kind of levels out so that we don't see this stress response during the medical procedure. Music is also very good at attracting our attention. This has especially been studied in relation to music and pain. But it is also important in relation to insomnia because, as most of us have probably experienced, part of not being able to sleep is often an inability to let go of whatever keeps our mind busy. It can be thoughts, it can be emotions, it can be memories or thoughts about things that you have to remember in the future. So if music can provide a positive distraction, then we'd also expect it to improve sleep. And finally, as I already mentioned, music can affect emotions. And this was the early study that I showed you before. This is what we call a meta-analysis, so like a paper summarizing the results of several neuroimaging studies that are available by now and showing very consistent activations of these limbic emotional regions and also the reward network. And of course, this is also important for sleep because we know that there's a strong association between sleep problems and emotional difficulties. So also for mental health, sleep is a very fundamental aspect, which is often affected when we are in difficult emotional states or experiencing stress or difficult life transitions. So in that sense, sleep is a very fundamental element of mental health, you could say. What about the effects? So we know that many people use music as a sleep aid, but does it work? So here we summarize the clinical trials evaluating the effect of music as a sleep aid. Here we see 10 studies that reported results that could be included in this is what we call a meta-analysis. So we summarize the results of the individual studies. So this is the estimate of the effect. They all measured the degree of sleep problems. So we see that all studies actually find a reduction in sleep problems, which in summary shows a very consistent effect of music on sleep quality and the ability of music to actually reduce the amount of sleep problems. And of course, from a scientific perspective, it's always very important to evaluate the quality of these studies, because they may show great results, but if the quality, the methodological quality of the study is terrible, then we can't really trust those results. But in general, the quality is actually quite okay. One major problem, of course, that we have with music interventions is that we cannot blind participants to whether they listen to music or not. They will know. When you test the effect of pharmacological solutions of medicine, then you can blind people to whether they get the active treatment or not. But with music, that's not really possible. So this, of course, sleep problems are many different things, and the reason for the sleep problem can be different. Actually, we don't see a difference in the effect depending on the basis of the sleep problems. We don't see a difference in the effect either depending on whether it's the researcher that chooses the music or whether people have an individual choice. Even though in many other domains, for instance, the effect of music on pain, we do see that the effect is larger when people can use their own preferred music compared to when the researcher of the study chooses one type of music that everyone listens to. So that's definitely a very important element. But for sleep, so far, with the number of studies available, we don't see an effect of that. And then also some studies have added relaxations instructions with the music and others don't. But so far, it doesn't seem to make a difference. So we're still investigating this, and we are very interested to hear more about the habits of using music for sleep. So if any of you ever do that, please fill in our surveys. You can use this QR code here, or you can go to the Music in the Brain webpage, find the contact tab here in the menu, then there's a page with the link to the survey. Because we're really interested in knowing more, especially about this landscape of the type of music people use for sleep and the role of music preferences and individual differences, how that determines the choice of music. So with that, I just want to thank all my collaborators of these projects and my colleagues of Music in the Brain, and of course, the different funding that has supported our research. Yes, and thank you for listening here.
Thank you, Kira. Really, really good. I'm just gonna go back to the normal view. Hopefully we're back now. Very interesting on the fact that there was no real conclusion of whether it's better or worse. And what I'm thinking about is also, could there be like some need for personalization of the music for sleep, for example?
I definitely believe so. So as I said, this part has not been investigated very much yet. When the studies that have been conducted have used, music based on the kind of basic research hypothesis, saying that, okay, the music should be slow, it should be preferably instrumental with a relatively simple structure. Also, analysis of lullabies shows that they're generally quite repetitive. And as Christian also mentioned, predictability is a major factor. But we recently also conducted a study collecting a large amount of Spotify sleep playlists and analyzing the music tracks from these sleep playlists. So we had around 1,000 sleep playlists and more than 225,000 music tracks. And actually, those analyses show that on average, the sleep music is slower, more instrumental, more often on acoustic instruments, and has a lower energy level compared to the music that people listen to like all around the clock. But we also saw a huge amount of variation in the sleep music. So when doing a specific type of clustering analysis, we saw that some of these clusters represented the like prototypical type of sleep music, but there were also 3 clusters with more like mainstream radio, pop rock music, rap, R&B, that was a lot more like upbeat, up-tempo music, had a higher level of danceability. That's one of the audio features that Spotify provides. So far, we don't really know a lot about these individual differences, and that's what we really want to target with this survey that I mentioned. So which factors determine which type of sleep music that people choose? Presumably, the Spotify points toward the fact that, you know, the general music preferences of people also play a huge role when choosing music for sleep. So the type of music that people like to listen to during daytime is also reflected in their sleep playlists. But we don't really know. Another factor may be there can be different types of motivations for using music for sleep. Some may use it for relaxation. Other people may use it more for distraction, as I mentioned. Some people may use it to mask external sound or external noise from the environment. That also requires music which has a kind of dense texture. So if you want to mask sound, you cannot use music which just has like one piano note every other second. So yeah, we're really trying to look more into which factors determine the choice of sleep music and the type of music that people use.
Yes, I guess it's also hard to ask someone like, what kind of music makes you sleepy, right? I mean, if you think about it, I can't really think about anything. I guess silence makes me sleepy. I don't know, but it's probably also hard to, let's say, if we start with a questionnaire and you present 3 types of music, which one sounds more sleepy to you? Maybe it's even hard to personalize it like that. I don't know.
No, so yeah, I agree. It's difficult in that sense. Also because when you ask people directly, sometimes it's more like their mental ideas of what sleep music should
Exactly.
sound like that they respond from, which may be different from the experience they have when actually listening to the music and engaging with the music in a sleep setting. So we are trying to ask what what kind of
Right.
music people already use, and then also ask for some demographic variables, sleep variables, music preferences and habits, and then use our machine learning analysis to see to kind of explore how these things are linked.
Cool. Go, Christian.
A question in there, Kira?
Yeah.
One thing that I have thought of, and from the experience of myself using music to fall asleep with, is the fact that you use the same music. I mean, the exact same music each night, for instance, so that you kind of train the body to know that, okay, when this impulse or this stimulus is coming, I know what's happening, or the body maybe even knows what happened. Have you been looking into like this kind of programming the brain or the body to what to expect from using this?
Yes, definitely. I that is also, it has not been so systematically investigated yet. Um, but I fully agree that from my perspective, part of the effect is also building an association between the specific music stimuli and the process of falling asleep. And that takes time. That's not something that necessarily happens the first night or the second night or the third night. That's an association, a conditioning, we call it in the psychology language, that is gradually built up, or that, again, this has not been directly explored, but that's definitely also one thing that we're very interested in. When people use music for sleep, do they use the same music, maybe the same artist or the same genre, or do they use all sorts of different music? I think it's a very interesting question. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's kind of like the blessing and the curse with having access to all music in the world at Spotify, you know.
Yeah.
We have access to so much. And one of the ideas, just to with Soundwheel, we try to actually limit the library of what people can choose. So we kind of curate it and say, yeah, but because we believe in, you know, that you actually build up this relationship to the different parts of kinds of sessions or music. And when you have you're supposed to use them over and over again instead of always going on to a new one, because then you kind of train your system to know, okay, this can lift me up, or this can put me to sleep, and this can, you get a stronger, deeper relationship. Yeah. Anyway, I just think
Definitely, that's a good point. And actually, it also touches about one of the aspects that we're also exploring. So the role of familiarity. So I guess with your app, you compose the music yourself, so it will be unfamiliar to people, the exact music. Maybe they've heard something, you know, similar or whatever, but the specific music is not something that they know in advance. And that's something, at least in relation to sleep, we've been discussing that quite a lot. So familiarity can be good in terms that it enhances predictability, but also sometimes familiarity also means that you have already specific associations with the music, and which may be in the way for using the music for sleep or relaxation or a different purpose. So I think there can be arguments for and against, but I think, for instance, for your app, the idea of having specifically composed music that you create a specific association with, free of whatever music you might otherwise listen to, also makes sense, at least from a scientific perspective.
So Christian, what do you consider when you're creating music for sleep?
I mean, like predictability, a slow tempo, bass, something that kind of grabs you, holds you, you know, nurtures you basically. So I have the one of the later one I made. When I was creating it, I you know, always give it some name. It was called like wrapped in bass lines, you know. So it's like, you know, something that you really are being tucked in with. And the lullaby aspect, I think, is interesting too. Like the way the human voice have been singing lullabies maybe for hundreds of thousands of years, we don't know, but I think that can play a role in how we perceive. So some humming, like a grandmother, or parent that kind of nurtures you. I think that's nice. And long ones too. Like I said before, our sessions are usually 7 to 10 minutes, but the one we create for falling asleep are 15 to 20 minutes, because we don't want to change that. You know, we would like people to fall asleep before it's over. So they those are longer, and they are, you know, in Soundwheel you can always switch the guided narration. You can switch it on and off, so you can always use the music by itself. But these sessions, even with the guide on, you will have a guide in the intro, but you will not have a guide in the end. It will just fade out slowly, hoping that the user will be falling asleep by then.
Can I also ask a question in relation to that? It's because I have a student who's very interested in music for sleep, but specifically the feeling of the space of the music, so to speak. So now you're using words like, you know, being wrapped or being held, or is that something you consider? Because, you know, in music, you can play around with the space. You can make it sound as if it's in a huge church room, or you can make it sound as if it's in a very small. So just out of absolute curiosity for sleep, what would be your thoughts on this? As music producer, so to...
I mean, I would go with the more close the soundscape, so it doesn't feel like you're in a super open space. That's not a nice place to fall asleep. For instance, we have a session called like Winter's Den. I mean, like Vinterhi in Danish. Like you go into this cave and and the wind is roaring outside, and it's snowy, and you know, that sense of being tucked in or protected and rolled up. I think soundscape-wise, if you have a super open space with lots of reverb on everything, it feels like you're in the midst of somewhere big. And I think it feels more safe to put people in a smaller room or smaller space.
I fully agree, but I also find that a lot of like relaxation music has this huge reverb, huge space sensation. So to me, it's a little bit contradictory.
True, and a lot of people use lo-fi music, for instance, as a genre.
Yeah.
Also, like this is good for falling asleep, and they usually have lots of verb. And I mean, you couldn't say that there should not be verb. And even on that session I'm mentioning, there is also verb on some of the elements for it. But for instance, like there's a bass line that's playing like in two voices of bass playing and top. So there's like this really heavy foundation that kind of holds it tight. And then I think you can always, open a little bit in the top maybe and create a little more space there.
Great, guys. Yeah, I mean, with all this information, I'm wondering if we will ever get to a place where we have very objective stimuli, or I mean, because it sounds like it's not objective at all from until now. At least from what I can grasp. Or maybe it is objectively subjective. So depending on the person, there is a solution. Because you also showed, Kira, of all these health conditions, and how can we get to that? One day that we, through the years, can have better results for cancer, for example. That's very interesting.
Yes, so I think just to respond to the will we ever get to a full understanding? A full understanding is a big thing, but I think what we are aiming more towards is to try to disentangle the interplay between the like objective music characteristics, those we can measure and we can regulate, but then to understand that it's an interplay between the music characteristics, but also the individual differences and individual preferences, and see how does this interact. And I don't think it's impossible. I think you can definitely, of course, we cannot explain the full variation of what people will do, but I think we can definitely use this knowledge to develop more individualized solutions. So yeah, with music, it's never a like one size fits all. We know that music preferences are highly individual. And, some traditional relaxation music that some people will love, I know people, they get more or less aggressive by listening to it because they find it so annoying. So we really need to take those individual preferences into account in a way where we can kind of see, can we predict what would be the optimal music for this person, given the person's preferences, the purpose of listening to the music, etc.
I have a very good example. I'm a big metal fan, and metal makes me calm. And
Exactly.
some people can't even hear 1 second of it. So it's a very good example of personal taste.
Definitely. And we cannot disregard that. We cannot say, but when we measure blood pressure or heart rate, for most people, metal is stimulating. But for some, it will have a different effect.
Exactly. So. Okay, let's take we have a few questions here. So first one from Jacek, and he's saying, is there any evidence of specific genres of music involving people's productivity in information, computer-oriented professions? So he wants to be more productive while he's working in the computer. Is there any specific music genres that improve productivity?
Again, I don't think there is any there's not like one genre which is the optimal. It's a matter of seeing, okay, it should be engaging enough to actually, most often the effects on productivity is a matter of arousal, right? So you need a bit of stimulation to be more productive, not too much, because then it will stress you. So finding that right balance, and then finding also something that you like, which is engages you, but without distracting you, so to speak. Yes, so I don't believe in, and research doesn't support any one size fits all for this.
Christian, do you have anything to add about that?
Oh, I agree. One thing, though, I would say is that in related to productivity, I believe having a small pause is very important to be able to keep the focus. And I think music, at least the way we try to use it, is also very beneficial in terms of helping people having an actual pause instead of just believing they have a pause and then they are doom scrolling on their phone for 5 minutes, just bombarding the brain with other stimuli than the work, but it's not a pause. It's new stimulants from outside, you know. So maybe being very aware of having that mental pause and then back on it full focus. I think that can make a difference, at least as I've experienced.
Oh. All right, there's a couple more questions here. So says to Christian, how different are group meditations you lead from the app? When choosing sounds, are there any studies about the effect of different sound instruments on people, or are you following what you can experience from people's reaction? Not sure I understand. Or do you follow what you can experience from people's reaction? Do you understand?
Yes, I mean, I've have a very subjective approach to creating this, starting with me, myself, and growing and going from there, basically, because that's all I have at the end of the day. That's my compass and my emotions and my intuitive relationship to different melody lines or harmonies, and I've practiced to try to be transparent with that or make that come quite undisturbed through by not mentalizing too much about it. And then afterwards we can measure and see if this is working. And so far we have quite good. So that's the way. So I'm not trying to also people talk a lot about different frequencies for different effects within music. And I've always kept I believe that the most in-tune instrument that we have is like the human system, you know. So if you can utilize that for creating this in a way that it's not distorting the outcome, basically, I believe you are further than if you're just straight on, this has to be 332 hertz or whatever. That's my personal approach. I know a lot of people would say different, but I don't think we are not, as Kira probably agree, we're not done, you know, mapping all of this out. So there'll still be things we don't know, and for those to come into play, we shouldn't be too fixed on what we want to do. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And it's cool. I like your approach that then afterwards you check, okay, what's actually happening with this stimuli? Can we learn something from this? And then you can try new things and see where it goes, right? So that's pretty smart.
Yeah, and I think this came about because I was creating this for people using it, and then I had their feedback, and then it was good, and then I thought, okay, I'll create more, and I'll use it for this and this. So it wasn't me having this idea, I want to do this, and it kind of
exactly
with people using it from the very first. There was no app. I just sent out through email small MP3s to my clients, and they were using it and giving me feedback.
Co-creation.
Yeah, exactly. And then last year we had a case study done in the UK at Brunel University with an art therapist there, like a small study, but that was like the first real scientific research done on sound wheel, and was really great for me just to have myself totally out of that equation and still see great indications. Of course, it was a qualitative small study with 22 participants, but still seeing super interesting indications within the whole range of the psychosomatic field, basically. So now we are working on a greater study, and as you know, Kier, you need a lot of people to participate if you should be able to say anything in the end instead of just assumptions. But yeah, it takes time to get the funds for that. But now we want to step further, and we have a bigger study coming up now with the support of Danish Sound Cluster actually, and the innovation funds. So that's super exciting.
All right. I think that's good, guys. Thanks a lot for being here today. And it's been a pleasure. I've learned quite a bit about music health, or health for music, music for health. Appreciate you. Yeah, you can always watch this again. It will be online. And remember to answer the 5 questions at the end. And see you next time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, guys.